Hello everybody, my name is Paul Buitink and I'm here together with my friend and economist Felix Moreno, and we're going to talk with Michael Krieger of libertyblitzkrieg.com. He's calling in live from Boulder, Colorado. Hi guys.
Hi. Hey Paul.
And today we're going to talk about a lot of things, but especially about the dangers of increased global centralization of political and economic power. And we'll discuss to what extent Bitcoin and other developments can play a role in reversing this trend. Michael, Felix, you guys already spoke like 2 years ago, I think it was, for a Gold Money interview.
Yeah, that was a good one actually. So in case anyone hasn't seen that, I would go to YouTube and look it up. That was fun.
Yeah, and a lot has changed in 2 years. I think when you guys talked, you already addressed Bitcoin, but the main focus back then was still gold, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. Things have gotten stranger and stranger.
And you've been writing more and more about sort of, you're still following the financial markets, Michael, but you're also definitely branching out to all sorts of other aspects of macro or sort of super macro thinking. Not only what's going on with economics, but also with liberty in general, digital privacy, all of these things. Can you talk a bit about your transition over the past, let's say, 10 years? You were a Wall Street analyst and a banker, and you turned into an activist and blogger. How was that process like? And can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. It started really slow. I mean, I went straight onto Wall Street after graduating from college. I worked at Lehman Brothers, before it went tanked. I was in the equity research area, which was oil and gas, integrated oil, and so refining companies, Exxon, Chevron, the biggest oil companies, would dug into their 10K annual reports, modeled them, wrote research reports, did that for 5 years, then moved along to a firm called Sanford Bernstein, which is known for the strength of its research. But there I moved on to the trading desk, and on the trading desk I was responsible for looking at and analyzing and discussing commodities markets in general. So I branched out from oil to oil, copper, gold, precious metals, wheat, and then ultimately I branched myself out into talking about foreign exchange and things like that. And I was writing macro. I created my own macro piece toward my last few years, which was very popular while I was there. And then ultimately, I mean, look, you guys know the drill. The bailouts came. The corruption was apparent. You could see that the world was changing for the worse after the bailouts and TARP, and quite frankly, even though I really actually enjoyed my job, I liked the people I worked with, I was good at it. It just wasn't. It was left me very empty because I felt like I was making all this money, but I wasn't doing anything good. I wasn't doing anything bad either, but it was like, this can't be the purpose of my life. And then ultimately, when you face so much truth and it matters to you, and if you feel it in your spirit, you can't stay. So I left, and I've been writing pretty much ever since. And yeah, I guess I am kind of an activist. It's a weird thing. If you had asked me when I was 18, what are the odds of you being an activist one day, I would say 0%, because I didn't really passionately care about global issues so much. So it's strange. Life is strange, you just got to roll with the punches. But it's certainly a more fulfilling spiritual life, that's for sure.
And your wife or partner back then, what did she like that move, or she thought, well, what are you doing? You're giving up this nice income for this life of uncertainty and.
Right. Well, the interesting thing is back then I was actually completely single. So and this was 2009. After 2009, I left. So very early 2010. So that was part of it. That's part of what made it easy for me, is that I had no strings attached. I had no one to support, no one depended on me. And in fact, interestingly enough, part of me looked ahead 5 years and said, okay, well, what happens if I stay on Wall Street? I will have a mortgage, I'll have kids, I'll live in some suburb I hate, and I won't like my job. So I was like, I got to get out of here now. And so, not only did I leave Wall Street, I moved out to the center of the country, which I also vowed that I would never do. And I live in Colorado, and I mean, lifestyle is wonderful. And, obviously there's certain things that, I don't have anymore, like that kind of income, but lifestyle is fantastic. So it was a great choice, but it's not one anyone should take lightly. I can tell you that.
Yeah, and now we have Liberty Blitzkrieg. What is the purpose of your site, and what are the things you do for it?
Sure. So sometimes I like to say when people are like, "What do you do?" I'm like, I kind of say I'm chronicling a global crime scene, which is kind of what I think is going on. It's like I feel that so few people are able to express their frustration, or even put a finger on exactly what's bothering them. And I feel like because I have this financial background and my mind has always tended to kind of think macro, that I can kind of put together the pieces for people. Because what I really don't want to happen is is for this period of history to not be chronicled, to not be written about, to not, even if my efforts and all of our efforts are futile, right? Like we can't avoid World War III, or we can't avoid a horrible outcome. At least I kind of tried, you know, and at least it's there, it's written for future generations to see. And of course, I'm just one of many people doing this, but I feel deep down that I have to do it. It's one of those things where it's like I feel compelled to do it by something, you know, bigger than me.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so that's why I do it.
you're giving it away for free, right? So it's extremely difficult
Yeah,
to make money with
correct.
content these days. So what is your business model then?
Correct. Correct. Well, I mean, for now, the business model is pretty poor. Like anyone that does a blog that's trying to monetize through ad revenue. Um, I'm always looking for other things to kind of put on there, even if I don't love them. Like, you know, AdSense. I think we all know that what's happened to you know, per click revenue on AdSense. I've seen it drop something like 50% at least in the last 2 years alone. And you see the increase in ad blockers. You know, recently Apple apparently is going to roll out a way to easily block ads on browsing on mobile devices. So that's another thing. So you know, I've recently put in a couple of new ad programs. I try to partner with organizations and people that have similar philosophies. So we have actually two really. I have a Pacific Precious Metals partnership, and they're great. If you're in California, check them out. And then Open the Books, which is actually what they do. It's a good friend of mine runs or helps run it, and they actually look into every state and they show you, you know, how much the various politicians or city employees make, and corruption and things like that. So it's like you have to kind of seek out these partnerships. Problem is, a lot of the times these people are also not in, you know, they're in activist roles. So, you know, the key thing to that I would say to other people is like, if you're even thinking about, you know, leaving a good income to try to be like a writer or activist, good, more power to you. Just be aware of how difficult it is, and, you know, don't take a decision like that lightly. But if it's your passion, if it's everything, you know, if it makes you happy on a daily basis, then you know, you could try and see if you can make it work. But by no means is trying to provide content and make money off of it on the internet easy. And I would add that it's gotten worse since I started. And I would also say that, you know, it's the revenue monetization model, as you guys I'm sure know, on the internet is basically dead. I mean, you know, if you're huge, you'll find a way. But otherwise, you know, it's when I run the numbers, I mean, let's say there was a Bitcoin enabled way of getting paid a penny per page view, right? If that were actually in place, it sounds like nothing. A penny, who wouldn't pay a penny for an article, right? It would blow away Google AdSense earnings, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's just something to think about. It's a broke model, and someone's got to come around and fix it. But right now,
Yeah,
it's
I
broke.
like change to pull up.
You do take Bitcoin donations, right?
Yeah, and I still do. So if anyone out there likes my stuff, feels like throwing out some Bitcoin, send it along. I actually will also be putting up a PayPal donation button. I haven't wanted to do it, but I'll probably just have to do it to see, because, you know, at the end of the day, you're gonna if this is going to be a going concern, you need to kind of allow people to donate however they want to donate. So yeah.
Yeah, I see you on Zero Hedge a lot as well. That's one of the sites that really helped me understand the financial system much better. Also, Max Keiser, he will be on my event in Holland, in Rotterdam, on the 26th of September. He was, yeah, you're on his show often as well, and he has been instrumental to many to open eyes and to understand what's going on in the world. So it's great to see all these people connect. Zero Hedge, how do you meet with them, or how do you know the guys behind the website?
Yeah, look, Zero Hedge is one of those things where, you know, you guys kind of know as much as I do, except you know, I've been communicating with them for many years, since sort of the beginning. They've been huge for getting my message out there, and I mean, I haven't known them in person, but, you know, communicating in various ways for several years, and I mean, their success has been amazing. I think, we talked about this earlier. More power to them.
The first rule of Fight Club.
Right. Don't talk about who's in Fight Club. But yeah, so it's one of those things where, with their continued success and the amount of readers that they reach, and quite frankly, I mean, it's hard for me to sometimes put a price tag on the fact that I can actually influence people, even policy people, through Zero Hedge reposting my stuff because they have such a wide audience. So it's one of those things where you're like, oh, you're not getting necessarily monetarily compensated in the way you might like for publishing, but your impact is way greater than you might realize because of the global reach that Zero Hedge have. I mean, everyone kind of knows Zero Hedge. They might pretend they don't, but at this point, pretty much everybody knows who they are. Right.
Well, one of the topics you do write about often is, and also in your welcome part of on your blog, is our bankers, and especially central bankers. You think at one point in the future they should be tried for crime against humanity. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. I tend to pick on bankers a little bit. With good reason, and also I come from that world, so I kind of know that like most of them are adding zero value. In fact, they're taking value from society and making billions. I mean, that's the problem, right? It's not like they're not adding anything and they're just making a decent living. A lot of these guys are like, they're like making hedge fund managers 10, 15, 20, much more $1 million a year. You're like, why? I mean, in a sane world, you'd kind of think that free market or capitalism would reward people that are actually benefiting society with the most money, but that's not the world we live in. I think the key thing with that is, saying they should be tried for crimes against humanity is to kind of illustrate the point, which I believe is the single biggest problem in the world today. If we did this, we could kind of solve so many problems at once, and that's accountability, lack of accountability. And this goes for, where you are in Holland or where Felix is in Spain. I mean, nobody in power is accountable, ever. It doesn't matter if they're bankers, it doesn't matter if they're politicians, it doesn't matter if they're generals. And I try to focus on this quite often. Like, you have members of the intelligence community lying to Congress. You have General Petraeus leaking classified information, doesn't serve a day in jail. And then you have, of course, Ben Bernanke giving money, I mean trillions, to people who have all the money and power, and real wages have done nothing since this bailout. So my key point is, we will never improve as long as the people who have destroyed the world for decades either go to jail or are just pushed aside. And since they don't want to step aside. Yeah. So that's, sorry, Felix, it's hard to hear you.
No, I'm just saying that, that they're even rewarded for it. After all, we all remember that Time magazine article with Ben Bernanke on the front page, hero, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's not even that they aren't punished and they walk away into the sunset. Let me give you a great example. So General David Petraeus, not a banker, well, kind of now. So he was, as you know, he leaked classified information to his mistress, Paula Broadwell. Leaking classified information, as you know, Snowden did it, and they want to hang him, in the streets of Washington D.C. He can't even come back to America for being a wonderful patriot and letting us know what's going on. But anyway, so Petraeus not only didn't serve a day in jail for leaking the classified information, he now works for one of the biggest private equity companies in the world, KKR, Kohlberg, Kravitz, and Roberts, and he's probably making a fortune there. And not only that, just yesterday I highlighted the Daily Beast article, which pointed out that he's now advocating behind the scenes that the U.S., get this one, team up with Al-Qaeda to fight ISIS. This is what he's saying. He said we should team up with the Al-Qaeda fighters in Syria to fight ISIS. Incredible. So not only is he making a ton of money at private equity, didn't serve a day in jail, now he's like advocating some more insane foreign policy from a private citizen role. So in absolute insanity. It's like we can't get rid of this virus, this elite status quo virus. It's a cancer. It's a horrible cancer. It's global too. It's in Spain. It's everywhere. And so all of the people of the earth basically need to say, this isn't working. We need something completely new. And until that happens, it's continued theft, continued decay, continued loss of democracy. That's how I see it.
So how would you advocate that people try to change the system? Vote for Hillary, maybe?
Yeah, this is actually one of the more depressing parts of it. So from my end, and this is where I'm the optimistic guy, from my end, I think real change, sustainable change, is a grassroots thing. As you know, I think we all agree. It's a decentralized thing, and it's a grassroots thing, and it takes time as a result. So sort of my role in this is to sort of be like that Paul Revere of the internet, or one of them, saying, this is what's going on. You know, those of you who have skills or the ability or work in various professions, do something about it. You know, try to change things, try to make little changes in your life. Fortunately, I see that happening. So let's just take Bitcoin as an example. When we were freaking out about, you know, the TARP and currency and all that in 2008 and 2009, Bitcoin was being rolled out. You know, who could have known? And then all of a sudden, there's Bitcoin, and the world changed in a lot of ways, and is continuing to change. So I think all sorts of things like that are actually happening and churning on the grassroots level. And so it's important to get the word out, but it's also important to encourage these things and promote them. As far as what you were saying, this is the sad thing. So the Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump phenomenon in the United States is interesting. And it has, like, here's the thing. There is a positive side to it, but it's mostly negative. The positive side is that what it tells us is that people get it now. They get that the status quo is horrible, right? Because the status quo candidates cannot get a vote. So that's the good part. The bad part is that people are moving towards guys that actually their policies or who they are don't make any sense. You know, for Bernie Sanders, I like a lot of what he has to say, but he's economically a tyrant. You know, I mean, he just promises free stuff. He doesn't, you know, his brand of economic socialism essentially is anti-freedom. It's an anti-freedom form of economics. And then Trump is just a demagogue to me. You know, I mean, he'll say whatever it takes. He's funny and entertaining, and he knows kind of how to hit the right buttons. But I think he's a bad guy. So, you know, what do you want? A bad guy who is able to manipulate millions of people? I mean, we've seen that before, haven't we, in world history?
Yeah.
Not
so
a
basically,
good thing.
you're saying it's a good thing that people understand that things are fucked, but they lack the understanding of why things are the way they are.
Yes,
no, or
and
maybe even understanding many things, they lack an outlet to actually change things, at least through the political system.
Exactly.
Because as you well said, through the internet, free speech is growing. Things are changing, although very much slower than we would like in the money world, with things like Bitcoin and many other alternatives that have risen up because of Bitcoin. And there's changes happening in many places, but unfortunately not in the political system.
Yeah, no, that's right, and kind of what you would expect, right? Because the political system is captured. We all know that now. I mean, this isn't like conspiracy theory. Political system is captured. I mean, look at Greece. I mean, you know, they vote for something, it was the wrong answer, and they get the opposite. You know, that's the good thing, though, right? Because now it's like it's so in your face that you can't deny it anymore. So then it becomes, well, what are we going to do about it? And if what are we going to do about it?
Sorry, I was going to say that one of the biggest symptoms that we see in every single election cycle is that there's a huge majority in favor of lowering taxes. There's a huge majority in favor of peace, and we always get the president who raises taxes and invades 1, 2, or maybe 7 other countries.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, so I'm trying to think about what the article was. It was just the other day. Where was it? The majority of the people didn't want. Oh gosh, I totally forget. But it was one of these examples where the majority of the population. Oh yeah, it was Japan. So in Japan, there's big protests, biggest protests in a generation against this war legislation, which is essentially what they're trying to do is make it easier for Japan to get involved militarily in foreign entanglements. Obviously, who wants that? So the majority of Japan doesn't want this. They're pissed, but they're pushing it through anyway. You see? So it's like a lot of people in a lot of countries now do want sane things, but the governments are so completely insane. I mean, think about it. Like the government's basically saying, well, we want to make it easier to get into a really big global war, and the public's like, we don't want that, and then they push it through anyway. You see? So it's a dangerous situation, though, right? Because when people realize they're not free, that's when you're going to get some fireworks. So stay tuned.
Yeah, and in Europe we see the same thing, of course, where people vote for something. In Greece, they speak out. They have a clear result at the referendum, and at the same time, government they just ignore that outcome altogether, and they go their own way. So at some point, something needs to happen, right? Do you think it will? Do you expect to see more activism or an uprise of activism in the States or Europe? Where do you think things will the shit hits the fan sooner, in Europe or the States?
It's a great question. I mean, I think Europe is just so far forward. I mean, I point out Greece in particular as the most important kind of country to watch because all of the things in Greece are going to happen to everybody, right? I mean, they're overly indebted. Who's not overly indebted? They don't have democracy, but they thought they did. Who does have democracy? Nobody. So what's happening to Greece is they're just getting this wake-up call, and they're like years ahead of everyone else. Yeah. And so Greece is a great place to watch what works and what doesn't from an activist standpoint. So what we know for sure is voting doesn't work, right? Well, particularly if you get something sane. If you vote someone, if you vote a status quo person or someone willing to play ball, then okay, no problem. But democracy basically is dead. So we need to be clever, right? We're human beings. Like we've always been clever. Gandhi was able to essentially lead India to independence by being clever. He was very clever in his protest. And I think that's what's somewhat missing. Well, first of all, in America, I mean, just activism and is kind of like asleep. The sad part is people think activism is supporting Donald Trump now. It's pretty pathetic. But I think we will need to be a lot more clever than thinking the voting booth is going to solve anything. And I think again,
the Free State Project in the States. That's Felix. You said earlier there is almost we reached the point where we have enough signatures to actually make a change there. Maybe Felix, can you elaborate on that project a bit more?
Yeah, sure. Just in case you didn't know about it, the Free State Project is like a last-ditch attempt to change things through the political process by concentrating a lot of freedom-minded people in the state of New Hampshire. And with once they reach the goal of 20,000 people who pledge to move, if they reach that goal, they will all move to that state, or at least a significant number will move, and they'll try to change things through the electoral process and through all kinds of activism to try and make it a sort of an example to the world. Just the same as Hong Kong was an example to China, they want to make the New Hampshire an example of freedom for the whole of America to replicate. And it's very interesting because it's been many, many years in the making, and it's now, I think, 3,000 people away from reaching the goal, so they hope to reach it between next year and the one after that, and that would be very interesting because even if they don't manage to change things politically, they would be able to affect a lot of change through activism, through, for instance, you mentioned Gandhi, Mike. Well, passive resistance is much easier when you're surrounded by people who think the same way you do and who are willing to help you, for instance, by being on juries and using jury nullification. All those kinds of things are much easier when you're in a community with like-minded people. And in fact, I wanted to mention there's a very, very famous text by Etienne de la Boétie, which I'm sure you're familiar with, called The Discourse on Voluntary Servitude, which basically states the simple fact, because it's a fact, that even the worst tyrants rely on the passive support of the population. They can't stand if people are not actively, or at least, at some level, supporting them, paying for their soldiers, paying for their thugs, helping them, not resisting unjust laws, etc.
Oh yeah, I mean absolutely, and I think Felix brings up a great point. In the States, at least, the 10th Amendment to the Constitution solidifies states' rights. Now, of course, that's been eroded over the last couple of centuries. However, it still can manifest in different ways. I mean, in Colorado, of course, we had Amendment 64, which basically overturned, cannabis prohibition in the United States, and now you see like a handful of states have followed. I mean, and without states' rights, that would never have happened, never. So it's a great example of decentralization, local communities coming together. I mean, here you can do that, and I'm really glad you mentioned jury nullification, because this is a concept I recently wrote about, because in Denver, which is only about 20 minutes from where I live right now, actually 2 people were arrested in front of a Denver court for handing out pamphlets informing jurors of their right to jury nullification. Now, recently that's been sort of, now it's been said that it's legal to do this. Of course it is. But for people that don't know, jury nullification is a process that goes back all the way to, let's say, William Penn in 1670, who was acquitted by jurors, because they didn't agree with the law. They thought it was an unjust law. I'm not going to put this guy in jail for violating an unjust law. So I think it's very important people understand jury nullification, and everyone out there realizes and should share this with people. The concept basically means that you don't just judge the facts, you judge the law. And as a juror, that's why you have trial by jury. You have trial by jury so that you can actually have your fellow citizens sit in there and say, am I going to put my fellow man in jail for something so stupid? And people need to say, no, I won't. And that's the idea of jury nullification. And I hope that that idea is so dangerous that they tried to, they arrested people for handing out pamphlets about it. So it's stuff like this that's important from an activist perspective. Things that the status quo is so afraid of, that's what we got to focus on. Right. So jury nullification is one of those things. It's a great point.
Yeah, you're very lucky to have that in the States. Very few other countries have that principle enshrined in the constitutions and in the laws and customs.
Right.
Yeah, one other key thing that we already mentioned is, of course, Bitcoin, the main topic of this show. A great tool for people to rise up and to find and to use it as an alternative to avoid using the banking system. When was the moment you first heard about Bitcoin, Mike?
So actually, I heard about Bitcoin pretty early on. I was still in New York, so it was probably maybe the year it launched or shortly thereafter. And I read an article, a friend sent it to me. I think it was in New York Magazine actually, and I was like, whoa, this is so interesting. But then I forgot about it because I was like, you know what? I'm not technical. I don't know if this is just some sort of a fraud, so I didn't buy any or really look into it, unfortunately. But I did follow it over the next, let's say year or two period, and then finally I read an article about how WikiLeaks was able to survive because remember there was a financial blockade against them. They were able to survive through Bitcoin donations, and that's when I said, okay, even though I don't understand the technicals, this is important politically. And so I wrote my first article on Bitcoin. It was actually about $10 a coin in August 2012. And it was something like Bitcoin, a way to fight back against the financial terrorists, if you want to Google it. But it was 2012. It was kind of right before the explosion in the price. That's when I started writing about it. And then I actually had I have two very technical friends who I asked about it, and they're also paranoid and, they don't like the status quo at all. And they gave me, they gave me the technical, the lowdown, what it was, what it wasn't, and those things. And then I realized I could support it once I kind of had that. So that's my history with Bitcoin.
Great. So you've been following it relatively closely, I assume. What do you think of this current debate about the block size? So for people that don't know, I can hardly imagine there's still people out there that are interested in Bitcoin and are not aware of this discussion, but right now there is quite an intense debate between developers, miners, people that are participating in the community about whether we should increase the size of blocks in which we store transactions. Right. What is your take on that?
Okay, so one of the things I really try to avoid, and because I hate when other people do it, is when I give an opinion on something that I'm not qualified to give an opinion on. So this is one of those examples. I am not technical enough, and I'm also haven't paid enough attention to this to have a strong opinion. And because when I have opinions, they're generally pretty strong. So I'm not going to go there. But what I will tell you is this: the key thing for me in Bitcoin, and I know a lot of people have said this, but to really get the next kind of phase going, you are going to need a significant new chunk of people to start embracing it. The technical people, the libertarians, the anarchists, us, we're already there. How do we get the next 10 million, 20 million, whatever people to get on board? A debate like this doesn't help. All right, so while it may be necessary, and I'll leave that up to the experts, I will say that for someone on the fence is going to look at this and say, wait a minute, this can happen, this could be bad, isn't going to help. So I think hopefully Bitcoin gets through it. Hopefully it gets through it in a way that we are ideologically comfortable with. But what I will say is the key thing, if it does get through this in a good way, is for then that, like people have said, that magic app or whatever it is needs to come out. Basically people need a reason now because the politically minded people kind of are there. So people, your average person now needs a reason. Why is this going to help me? How is this going to help me in everyday life? Why do I need Bitcoin? And that hasn't happened. So that's my 2 cents on sort of the state of Bitcoin from a, let's say, layman's point of view. Even though I've followed it for a long time and knew about it before a lot of people, I am not an expert in Bitcoin. But that's how I see it from, let's say, super macro perspective.
Well, Mike, you were mentioning how the revenue-generating system for content on the internet is completely broken.
Right.
Bitcoin offers a potential solution. Maybe it's not there yet. Maybe it's not user-friendly yet. But there is a solution there for many of those problems. And I'm not just talking paywalls or donations.
Right.
I'm talking about all kinds of revenue-generating models for video, for written content, etc., even for forums and discussion boards. But yeah, there are many ideas of what could be the killer app, but it's not there yet. It will come, I'm sure.
Right. I agree, and I think that's the interesting thing in that as we've discussed, revenue monetization for content on the internet largely is broken right now. So how does that get solved? And I agree, micropayments with Bitcoin, it's great. I've been hearing about it for 2 years. Where is it? So that's the problem.
It's there actually. I mean, the best interview we had on this show was the first with Andreas Antonopoulos, and there were, I don't know, in total, it was still small amounts, but like 8 people or so tipping using ChangeTip, this tool, and it's still small potatoes, but at least it's possible. And I don't think there's a fiat currency alternative for something like that at this point.
Right.
Something that's cross-border, that it's instant. So yeah, there's this use case, but it's still relatively small, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. But we'll get there. I'm sure we'll get there. But again, it's like this stuff takes time. To do it right takes time, so we just got to be patient.
Any other things you're following? Because one of our viewers is asking what you think of Augur.net, which is a prediction market making use of Ethereum, I think. Are there any other things, because you were very early with Bitcoin,
right.
Are there other platforms or solutions or cryptocurrencies that you're currently following? And if you know about Augur, what do you think of that?
I don't know about Augur. I mean, I think I might have heard of it, but I couldn't speak intelligently to it. I will say prediction markets are very interesting. What you see over time is that like the masses of people chiming in on stuff tends to be more accurate than the experts, which are always wrong. I think I don't know if this is Augur, but the ability to sort of place bets on the outcome of certain things and make money. Is that what this is? Because then I have read about it, but that's that sounds pretty awesome. I as someone that follows events on a macro level would certainly be interested in participating in something like that. So I think that's cool.
InTrade. InTrade, a few years ago, there was a prediction market called InTrade, right. And basically they killed it in the States because of gambling regulations. They moved to Ireland. But they lost, like, I don't know, 90% of their users because of that move, right. And they ended up going broke, basically.
Yeah, no, I was familiar with that, and I am aware of it. As far as other stuff, I haven't, I kind of feel like the intellectual capital and also there's just a lot that Bitcoin has going for it. And so I've still focused. I mean, I am aware of Ethereum. It's above my head. I'll just tell you that right now. A lot of technical people I know love it, but it's too much. It's too much for me. So I'm still kind of hoping Bitcoin takes off to where it can take off. Other than that, I'm kind of just following local kind of barter currency stuff. So there's I think it's called TEM in Greece. It's a local, of course, these are localized barter networks, but they create their own currencies. It's digitized. A lot of people are using it. Seems to be working. I recently read an article about the Bristol pound in London. Yeah, Brixton pound. And so it's an area of London which has they create their own currency, and they've got these interesting art on the bills. Of course, these currencies aren't going to solve the world's problems or become a global currency like Bitcoin could. However, I think it's empowering for people to get involved in things like this. So local solutions are great. Bitcoin type solutions are great. I think anything in which people are choosing let's say consciously, what they use as a medium of exchange as opposed to what they're told to use as a medium exchange by their government or central bank is a very positive thing. So I encourage all alternative currencies, as long as they're not like total scams.
Yeah, Mike, you mentioned that Greece is an example for what we might see in many other countries. Well, one of the first things that happened in Greece were capital controls. Right. And there's many other countries that have capital controls right now, and we're seeing new restrictions in China on the stock exchange, but then they're moving on to currency as well. Actually, one of the things that Bitcoin does work for right now, maybe not everybody uses it because of the block size and so on, but for the people who use it right now, is to completely evade capital controls in Greece. You can absolutely ignore them and send money from Athens to London instantly, and say you have a website and you need to get paid by some foreigners. Well, right now you don't want to get paid in a Greek bank because you're not going to be able to take the money out. And that is going to last for months, because we saw the same thing happen in Cyprus, right, Paul?
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, by the way, I used to live in Brixton, in that area of London. It was in 2013. The currency was not really used much at all, but it's a funny kind of way to express yourself and to show that there is an alternative possible. And in Cyprus, in Greece, I just happened to I went to Cyprus a few weeks ago, and the economy is still reeling from that fateful episode in 2013. So it's very difficult to regain that trust also in the system, and people really still distrust each other there to a large extent. So Bitcoin is definitely a way to evade that kind of trust and to use it for international capital movement. We have a question also relating to this from Carlos Lizarraga and Rodrigo. He asks, Mike, do you think Bitcoin can undermine the state, as it will make paying taxes optional? It cannot be seized.
Oh, probably not. I mean, I kind of think if Bitcoin ever kind of becomes what I think it could, is that the state will make sure it gets its pound of flesh, out of Bitcoin one way or the other, and that's where I kind of see all other currencies popping up to do that. Maybe even precious metals. It's hard to say, but I mean that would be nice. It could happen if, let's say, we get a situation where, okay, let's put it this way: if the status quo is in power and Bitcoin becomes big, no chance. If the status quo crumbles in a pile of ashes and we are forced to restart. Right, so we get a control-alt-delete situation globally or in certain countries, then it's possible. Because you can have a whole new paradigm, you can have a whole new perspective, you can have a whole new government that does things completely different. You're essentially starting from scratch, which would be great. Then that's a possible thing. But no, I don't see that being likely, as much as it would be cool, as long as the current status quo has power.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're already well above the 30 minutes. Felix, maybe you want to say something about the conference you're involved with in Spain, a blockchain week.
Well, first you should say mention Reinvent Money and what the dates are for it.
Okay, well, that's very polite. Reinvent Money is a conference I'm organizing. It's in Rotterdam, the 26th of September. In Holland, there's still tickets available. It's about reinventing money, so we talk about Bitcoin, but also things like Michael mentioned earlier, like local currencies. But also there's all sorts of people that will speak about alternatives, which will not only be the decentralized alternatives, but also even people will talk about, okay, maybe we should have the government print debt-free money instead of having the banks create money through the issuance of loans. So it will be a very open event with all sorts of opinions. We have speakers like Andreas Antonopoulos talking about Bitcoin, of course, but also a journalist, Max Kaiser, and we even have the president of Liberland. It is a new initiative in Europe, basically a new kind of candidate state, and we have many more speakers. So people should check out Reinvent.money, and if they're in Europe or in the area of like in Western Europe, they should definitely try to stop by. It's on a Saturday. Felix?
And a few weeks after that, in October, there's Blockchain Week in Barcelona, which is much more focused on business and business applications for Bitcoin technology, and I'm helping that along, and that should be fun as well.
Cool. And you're going to speak there as well yourself?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. Well, Mike, too bad you're not in Europe around that time.
Yeah, too bad. I'd love to check out all these things. Yeah, once you're in Europe, you can kind of get around pretty easily. But I'm pretty far, so probably going to stick around here for now. But maybe next year.
Cool. Well, it was great having you on. Any other things you want to address?
No, I mean, thanks for having me, guys. It's a fun conversation. I hope we do it in the future again. My site is libertyblitzkrieg.com, liberty, BLITZKRIEG.com. Basically, I don't focus on one thing. What I focus on is macro or super macro, trying to connect the dots. So I'll discuss everything from like the potential for World War III to Bitcoin to jury nullification to NSA spying to rigged financial markets. It's kind of all over the place, but it is all macro, and I do try to link everything together. So I hope everyone listening will come check it out, and look forward to putting out some good content for people. And thanks.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Mike, and thank you too, Felix, and let's do it again in the future.
Thanks, Paul.
That was great.
See you. Bye.
See ya.